So you may be wondering how you can keep squatters out of a home that you inherited. And when it comes to this subject, there are two different types of squatters that we're going to talk about. First, we're going to be talking about those squatters that come in that are unwanted guests that broke into a property and decided to move in and make themselves at home. The second that we'll be talking about are those squatters who maybe were caretakers for a loved one and decided to never move out and then become combative about moving out. Or people that were at one time allowed to live on the property and then that right to live there has been revoked, but they still decide to live there. So let's take a look at this and a few ways that you can address that issue. Now, the first that we're going to talk about is how to deal with people trying to break in and live in the property. The first thing that you want to do is make sure that the property is completely secure. Now, think of the basics. What do the windows and the doors look like? Are there sliding doors? Are there sliding windows? Are they newer vinyl types? Are they fancier heavy-duty steel types? Or are they old aluminum framed windows that slide from the 70s? Heck, I've seen one of those on a property from the 70s where the lock for the sliding door couldn't even go back into the frame of the door. So it was impossible to lock it. Another thing you can do that's really easy to remedy involves doors. Most of the time, in my experience, I've seen doors get broken into by squatters that are in the back or the side of a home. Or maybe it's the door that you can walk through in the back of a garage. An easy way to secure those, if people are able to pick the locks or break the handles off, is to screw the door to the door frame. You can take some wood screws and then angle it in there so the screw catches part of the door and goes into the frame. Now, if you spread these out throughout the door, and I'm not saying put 100 screws in there, but if you put one or two at the top and bottom, a couple in the middle, it should be more than enough to even help keep the door from getting kicked in as easy. Now, this one probate home that I sold recently had this exact problem. Someone broke into the home and decided to move in. Now, the neighbors were all nervous because they have some stranger who's not allowed to be in the home living there. And they became even more uncomfortable when one morning around 4 a.m., this squatter decided to go out of the home that they broke into, hop the fence into the neighbor's backyard, and while the neighbor was sleeping, they slashed open their screen on their bedroom window, and the window was open because it was a warm summer night. Now, thankfully, these people who were home woke up and were able to fend off the intruder before anyone was injured. But as you can imagine, that situation could get really scary and really intense, and it could have worked out much differently. So another option that you can do that's a little bit more expensive is you can invest in a security system. Now, something like this may be a great idea if you decide that you're going to hold on to the home for quite some time or if you're going to move into it. Usually security systems work a couple of different ways. They either allow you to finance the equipment through the first year of your contract, or they have no contract and they have you purchase the equipment up front. One thing that I would definitely recommend is that you want to check the validity of the security company, even if it's a nationally known brand. Now, I myself had a home that was broken into, and the nationally known brand security system that I had didn't even call the police when my home was broken into, even though the alarm was going off. Thankfully, the alarm went off and it scared away the intruder. Unfortunately, my neighbors were pretty upset because my alarm had been going off for hours, and they were all baffled as to why the police weren't called. Lesson learned from that experience was to go around and ask the police, the ones that you see in your neighborhood or your city, stop and ask them real quick, hey, is there a security system for homes that you like, or a company that you like working with? Oftentimes they'll recommend one that has a lower rate of false alarms because you can get charged for those in some cities. And also they prefer ones that oftentimes give them a quick response. Now keep in mind, if someone's going to move into the property and that's their intention by breaking in, the faster that you can get the police over there and say that, hey, this intruder is not allowed in the property, the more options you have to get them out of the property. And the other option for keeping people out that I think is pretty interesting, because it's the most effective, but it's also the easiest for someone to remove. And that would just be these: no trespassing signs. If you need one, I have them for free. just send me a text or a call, 760-697-5661. Be happy to send one to you. Having a no trespassing sign gives you more options because now this intruder becomes a trespasser, especially if you have the whole property labeled with no trespassing signs. It can also save a lot of problems because if you have a property that's been vacant for a long time and you have ones like this that say direct all questions about this property to this guy, it keeps your phone a little more quiet and allows you to focus on the things that you really need to focus on rather than the annoying, nosy, curious neighbor questions or people that just want to know, hey, I have no one to talk about what's going on with that property. Or the people that think, hey, I have nothing better to do, maybe I'll call and find out about a property. It keeps it off of your plate. Now, you also may be wondering, what do you do about those people that move in and never go away? Like the caretaker that your parent had. Maybe that person was a live-in caregiver and they did a great job. They were great with the family. Everyone loved them, except for your loved one passed away and they decided that they really like the property and they're going to move in. How do you deal with that person? Well, in that situation, it's a little bit different. You're going to have to deal with an eviction. And when you deal with an eviction, there's a very specific process that you have to go through and it's very lengthy. You may want to get an attorney involved. And you also may be thinking, wow, that's going to cost me even more money. So that brings me to another option. You could even approach that intruder and ask them if they'd be agreeable to do a cash for keys. Now, you may ask an attorney how much they would charge you to handle the eviction and how long that would take, and then also look at how much damage that person could cause to the property. And also if they decide to invite different friends in and you have to evict more people than just one person, it can snowball into a giant mess. I've seen cash for keys used in multiple situations where, say that there's a tenant that lives in a property and the owner wants to sell it, and the new buyer pays the tenant some money to break their lease early. Another time is when you have an intrusive tenant. It's like the situation with a squatter where you can give them a few dollars. You know, it's never fun to think about giving someone who broke into your home, especially in a culture where we were taught that our home is our castle and it should be our safe space. Having someone intrude that space, even if it's not one that you personally live in, but it's one that you have memories in and one that your loved one owned, it is so violating and it's hard to get past those feelings. It makes you angry and it makes you ticked off. And the thought of having to pay someone money to get them out of there can be very frustrating. But if you have the conversation with the attorney wondering, hey, how much is it going to cost to get this person out? How long will it take? And what other implications could come from it? But if that person would leave for maybe $1,500, $5,000, $10,000, it's a lot of money, but maybe it's cheaper than going the lawyer route. And it could be a first option, even though it's a pretty upsetting one. Now, finally, if you're deciding to Google this, you're probably coming across news stories where people decided to be the hero and someone moved into their mom's home and they drove 8 hours to get over there and they kicked all of the squatter's stuff out and they sat on the couch and they were really brave. And then when the squatter came home from work, they're like, hey, buddy, you don't live here anymore. Bad idea. You can cause so many more problems and get hurt. Don't do it. But that does bring me to the most effective option that is completely free. One of the best options is to build a relationship or at least open a line of communication between yourself and the neighbors of the property. Just like the story where the intruder left the home that they were squatting in and tried to break into a neighbor's home, the neighbors have a vested interest in keeping that property secure and safe. They likely want to make sure that there aren't intruders living there bringing down the neighborhood or causing dangerous or uncomfortable situations to happen right next to where they live. So even if you live a ways away, it's good when you're at the property to knock on the doors, introduce yourself to the neighbors, and exchange contact information. But it is a good idea to also get a local realtor involved. And if you live in San Diego County or South Orange County, give me a call. I'd be happy to give you one of these signs or a couple of them that you can use at your property. And if you live far away, we could even talk about how I could put them up for you. Please give me a call or a text, 760-697-5661. And if you're curious for some free probate resources, please log on to sellitscott.com/probate help.